The agenda is set. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. It's time to talk. NSA leaker Edward Snowden has political fans in Germany. Does Berlin dare to offer him a new home? The violence that was Turkey this summer. Will peace finally come by putting Turkey in the EU? And Syria's civil war now home to polio. A plea to all sides: let the doctors save your children. Well, welcome to the show, everyone. I've invited three people today to talk, argue, and pry apart these headlines. My first guest has dodged bombs in a cave in a makeshift clinic in Syria, all to help that country's wounded. I'm happy to welcome back to the show Dr. Tancred Ströbe. He's head of the German division of Doctors Without Borders. Tancred, you just finished another visit to the area, and you're bringing back some sobering news from the medical front. We're going to hear from you a little bit later on in the show. My second guest says Europe must renew its embrace of Turkey, even if it never lets Turkey join the EU. I'm happy to welcome to this show Dilek Kurban. She is one of Germany's leading Turkey analysts based here in Berlin at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. Dilek, it's good to have you on the show. Thank you. And my next guest is one of the leading voices in the campaign to bring Edward Snowden to Germany. I'm happy to welcome to the show Stefan Liebisch. He is a member of the Left Party. He's a member of the parliament here in Berlin, and he's also the spokesman for transatlantic relations for the Left Party. Stefan, good to have you on the show. Will there be any relations to speak of with the U.S. if you bring Edward Snowden to Germany?
I think so, and I think it should be like this, because that we are partners and friends doesn't mean that we have to accept everything. If you would invite Brent, a friend, to your home and he would sneak around the corners and would read your emails, would it be a good answer as a friend to say nothing, to ignore him, or would it better to tell him, end this?
Well, I'd probably confront him. And I think a lot of people are wondering, why isn't there more confrontation directly from Berlin to Washington? Why do you need to go through Russia and use Edward Snowden? Let me ask everybody here at the table. Are you shocked at the support that Edward Snowden is getting? What do you say?
No, actually, I'm not. Well, I mean, I don't know Germany that well, obviously, but I think in any, when I think about the world at large, I'm not surprised at the support he's getting, because I think there's a concern in every country about the states going too far and the intelligence agencies going too far, state surveillance going too far into people's privacy. And I think this is, but yeah, I'm not surprised.
You're not surprised. Tucker, what do you say?
No, I'm concerned because as a medical organization, we deal with sort of delicate information, and we basically have to rethink our strategy to transfer all those information. And working all over the world, we cannot sort of trust the email system, even sort of the Blackberries are not safe anymore. Yeah, so that and I'm grateful that there is someone who uncovers how unsafe it is to use those means.
Stefan, would you say that Edward Snowden is a hero?
That is not the question, if he is a hero or if he is not. I think he did the right thing. He said to us the truth while the US government lied to us. It is absurd that a partnership government would monitor the cell phone of our government. We shouldn't accept it. And it is absurd too that the chiefs of intelligence services right now are negotiating a no-spy treaty because they are spies.
All right, I want to pick up on that in a second, but you say he's not a hero,
yeah.
But you want him to come to Germany. You want to give him asylum.
Yeah, because
don't you give asylum protection to people who have done heroic deeds?
If you look at our law of residence, then our government is allowed to protect the political interests of our country. And if there is a man like Edward Snowden who did this, then we should grant him asylum, yes.
Okay, I mean, interesting, hearing that he could be one of Germany's best friends right now. The U.S. position is clear on Edward Snowden. He remains high on the public enemy list. The White House and top congressional lawmakers have rejected any talk of clemency for the fugitive NSA leaker. Snowden says he would like to testify before Congress about what he knows, but if he can't go home, maybe he'll find a new home right here. There are political parties maneuvering as we speak to force the German government, Chancellor Angela Merkel included, to grant Snowden asylum. Once Snowden is here, his fans contend he'll be able to tell all. Now, does this really make sense? Is Snowden that important to Germany?
In Germany, the U.S. spying scandal took on a new dimension with claims that Washington had tapped Chancellor Angela Merkel's cell phone. The focus is now on the man behind the revelations, former NSA intelligence contractor Edward Snowden. A German opposition politician met him last week in Moscow. Snowden said he'd like to provide the German government with more details, but he fears coming to Germany could mean he'd be handed over to the U.S. There are now growing calls in Germany to grant Snowden asylum so he can travel to Berlin and share what he knows. Would that spell the end of friendly relations between the U.S. and Germany?
Stefan, are you about to destroy the transatlantic relationship?
No, I don't want to do this, and I think no one in the German Bundestag would do it. But friendship and partnership doesn't mean to ignore such things. I think as friends we have to say there is a red line and you have crossed this red line. You cannot spy at the cell phone of the head of our government, and you cannot spy hundreds of thousands of emails of the German citizens. We cannot accept this.
Do you trust Edward Snowden more than the Secretary of State of the U.S.?
To be honest, in this case, yes. But to be sure, we should ask him.
How can you talk about, then, a relationship of trust when you can say you trust a 30-year-old contracted for the NSA to tell you the truth more than you do the White House or the State Department?
Because we did have the facts on the table. I don't think that The Guardian or very famous newspapers in the world would lie. They look at the papers, and I think the papers are true. And I have to fear that the US government did lie to us, and we cannot accept it. And so we want to invite Edward Snowden to us, have a special meeting, ask him, and then we will know more.
How do you know what Edward Snowden would tell you is the truth? He's got the documents, that's one thing, but he also says he's seen and heard things.
Yeah.
Aren't you being judge and jury by saying you believe him enough to give him asylum?
For that, we need such a parliamentary inquiry, and we will have a special meeting next week from our parliament for especially this case. And in the US, you have parliamentary inquiries. In Germany, we will have it too. And then we will ask questions, and then we will make decisions. But it is not a good way to have the chance to ask him.
Why don't you just ask him in Russia? Why don't you fly to Moscow like the Green politician Strobel did and ask him?
I think this is the second best way. I think we
but
should
wait a minute. Isn't it much safer to do that? He's in Russia where he has asylum. Yeah. You can go there. You can get the information from him. Why not do that?
But wouldn't it be terrible to be safer in Russia than in Germany? And I think Germany is a democratic state. We have civil rights here, but not in Russia.
But what is the point here? Yeah. Is Germany's sovereignty and security the point, or is the security of Edward Snowden the point? Why is his welfare any concern of yours, Stefan? He's an American citizen.
He would prefer to come to Germany, and he has the chance to come to Germany. And even if you look at the extradition treaty between the United States and Germany, we have the chance to have him safe here. We shouldn't have extradition to the United States because it is in our essential interests, and this is a part of this treaty. We can have him safe here, and we have to say to our US-American friends, we will.
But why, let me ask you again, why not interrogate him, why not question him in Moscow?
Because we are the Parliament of Germany and not a tourist office. We have to be here, we make our decisions here, and we invite witnesses to Germany, and we would be very happy to have him here.
A majority, the polls that I've been reading the last couple of days show that a majority of Germans do not want asylum granted to Snowden. Is Stefan on the wrong side here?
I mean, I think there are two issues here. One is him, Snowden, whether he should be given asylum or not, and the other is, the German governments and societies wish to know the truth. When you look at Snowden as an individual, under international law, anybody who has a well-founded fear of persecution on various grounds, is entitled to seek asylum. And looks like this person could arguably be have well-founded fear of persecution on grounds of
Well, he could be prosecuted because he he broke the law in the United States.
Well, not just prosecuted. I mean, when you look at the example, I mean, post 9/11 policies in the U.S. are very concerning in terms of human rights violations. Look at Guantanamo Bay. Look at what happened to the soldier. What was his name? Who had
Manning.
Manning, yeah.
I'm talking about
he may not get due process in the U.S. courts.
I'm talking about. Let me ask Tancred too. I'm talking about Edward Snowden, though. He was a contractor with the NSA. He was, he had to take an oath that he would not leak any information, but he did that anyway. So he broke the law. It's a federal law. Now, is it in Germany's interest to say that federal law and the enforcement of that law is not in Germany's interest?
Well, I think they have to sort of balance what is of greater value, the truth he's speaking out here, or a law he may have broken somewhere. Yeah? So I think that's have to be balanced out by the politicians. I think sort of the value he can bring in by telling the truth and all his knowledge is of great value. Yeah? But,
so you want him to come?
Well, personally, I mean, I would leave that up to the politicians here, but I think...
You've got a politician here. Yeah.
Right, so ask him. No, I think we should make use of his intelligence and knowledge and bring that to the public.
I mean, Angela Merkel has said that she does not want asylum to be given to him and that the relationship with the United States is paramount to any decision that is made in the wake of this scandal. You're not on the same page with her.
No, I disagree. We are a sovereign state, and I think it is important to protect the interests of our citizens. And I cannot accept a mass surveillance about the emails and Facebook and Twitter dates. And
how are German citizens going to be more secure and safer if you have Edward Snowden come and speak on German soil? I'm trying to see the connection here. How are we in Berlin going to be safer?
We need to know the facts. What does the NSA know? And with these facts, we can debate with our US-American friends what practices we will accept and what practices we will not accept.
Okay.
And I think before we can do this, we need the facts.
How likely do you think it is that he's going to get asylum? Are you going to try to force a vote in the Bundestag, in the parliament?
We will have a meeting next week. We will make this proposal, and I have heard from the Green Party that they will agree with us, and there are a lot of people in the Social Democratic Party too, so we could have the majority.
Do you have enough votes there, Stefan?
We have 3 of the 4 groups in the German Bundestag who would agree, but the problem is that one group is negotiating with the Christian Democrats right now, so I'm not sure what they will do.
Okay, and that's the SPD.
Right.
All right, so it's less likely now as these coalition negotiations, but that's domestic politics. I mean, it looks like you're not going to get this vote. So what then does Snowden become for you if you can't bring him to Germany?
The second best option would be that he would ask him as a witness in his present home in Russia. I don't like this option, but...
But you would do it?
I would do it.
Okay. I mean, I think probably most Germans agree with you. At least the polls tell us that that's probably what most Germans would like to see happen. What about relations with the United States? Do you trust the United States? You say our American friends.
To be honest, I don't think that states are friends or governments are friends. They have to work in the interest of their people, but we have a good and stable relationship and partnership, and we should go on with it. But it is no longer a time that we are a colony or something like that. Well, we are a sovereign state, and so sometimes we have to say no.
Okay, but is Snowden for your party, though, Stefan? I'm trying to get to the core of this. Is this a tool for your party to rub this scandal in Washington's face?
No.
Schadenfreude is the German word.
No. I would be very happy if we would not discuss this topic. And to be honest, I knew that intelligence services doing some things which are very strange, but that they are monitoring the cell phone of the Chancellor of Germany, I wouldn't believe it.
Okay, there's that. I mean, you're a politician, you're a member of parliament. Does Germany monitor the cell phones of, let's say, the French president?
I don't know. I hope not. But the problem is not, in this case, you are right. This problem is not a US-American problem. It is an intelligence service problem.
Okay. Have you considered pulling the heads of German intelligence agencies, bringing them into parliament and asking them questions about how they dropped the ball? Aren't they supposed to be protecting Germans?
We have a lot of problems with our intelligence services. We did have a special committee in the last legislation about the so-called NSU scandal. They didn't see
the neo-Nazi killings.
Yes, you are right. And so I'm very unhappy with our intelligence service, so I don't would defend them.
You would not defend them. So we've got a lot of factors here, a lot of balls we're juggling right here. But Tonka, let me ask you, as a German, do you feel like your security agencies here in Germany, have they let you down?
Well, I mean, as I said earlier, I think the safest thing today to communicate sensitive issues is by meeting in a park and talk directly. So everything that goes cross-border is difficult.
Well, even in a park, you can still be tapped.
Right.
All right,
Can, yeah,
it's the 21st century.
Yeah. No, I think the good thing we learned over the last couple of months is that if you have confidential issues, and as doctors and a medical organization, we have to deal with that. We have to completely rethink our whole strategy, how we deal with that. And honestly, I don't trust any sort of secret service, because they, of course, have their own agenda and they're not. I mean, they have to protect the politicians, the government, more than probably the society itself.
Is Germany giving America a raw deal here? Forgetting about what happened after 9/11 and the panic that the United States had, the fact that they stopped all restraints on intelligence gathering to find out what was behind the 9/11 plot. Isn't it understandable that a country would maybe, in some instances, eavesdrop on the chancellor's phone?
But there are red lines. Yes,
it is
understandable.
But is the reaction that you're calling for, Stefan, the reaction, is it proportional to what happened in the spying scandal? Aren't you overreacting?
No, I think it is proportional, and I think what they did is unproportional. We are not talking about North Korea or China. We are talking about partners and friends in some way. And in this case, you cannot go so far.
Before we move on, I just want to read something that was in Der Spiegel. It's a commentary from the U.S. If Europeans want to salvage the transatlantic relationship, they must accept that they will have to do so without an official public apology. The Americans, particularly in Washington, they are really perturbed with the Germans. They argue that their quarrels and disappointments with past German policies never chipped away at their fundamental trust in Berlin. Why are the Germans so willing so quickly to give up trust in the Americans?
I think it is not our fault. We didn't spy at the cell phone of Barack Obama. The NSA did it to Angela Merkel.
Well, that we know
NSA
of,
did
Stefan,
to the
right?
German citizens. And so I think it is the right answer.
Okay.
I don't need apologies.
Yep.
Apologies are not important for me. I think we should end this practice.
Okay. Last question, move on. If Germany has the ability to tap Barack Obama's telephone, should it do it?
No.
Do you think it has happened?
I don't know, and I hope not.
All right. Okay, let's move on. It was just a few months ago when I put Turkey's crackdown on dissent and free speech on the agenda right here. You may remember the consensus this past summer on this program was that Turkey's march towards a liberal democracy in the mold of the EU had been significantly stalled. Tear gas, water cannons, all aimed at peaceful protesters in an Istanbul park. In June, Turkey seemed more foreign to Europe than it has in a long time. Well, that's the past. The summer, the protests, the violence are over. And the European Union is restarting membership talks with Turkey. But which Turkey is Europe talking to?
This week, talks on Turkey joining the EU resumed after a break of more than 3 years. They were initially scheduled for June, but they were put on hold after anti-government protests in Turkey led to a violent police crackdown. Germany headed the countries demanding a delay to the EU membership talks. Now the thinking is the talks might counter authoritarian moves by the Turkish government and encourage reforms. There's little hope the talks will get anywhere fast. Germany is just one of the EU countries opposed to Turkey ever being granted full EU membership. But other European countries are eager to bring the booming Turkish economy into the fold. With the memories of violence still fresh, is this the right time to be rewarding Turkey?
What do you say to that, Dilek? Is this the right time to reward Turkey with accession talks, considering what happened in June?
I mean, first, I think we should not see this as rewarding Turkey, because accession negotiations with Turkey, as with any other candidate country, have a certain natural flow of their own. There are two critical decisions in this process. One is the EU's decision to open accession negotiations with a candidate country, and the other is the EU's decision to give full membership. The first one has already been given by the EU back in 2004, and accession negotiations have started in 2005. The other is nowhere in sight. It's not going to happen in the next 10, 20 years or so, probably. Now, where we were, where Turkey and EU were, was just in between, somewhere in between these 2 points. Actually, not even between these 2 points. There are 35 chapters that candidate countries and the EU negotiate in this process. It's a long process. With Turkey, since 2005, only 13 have been opened, and only one of which have been provisionally closed.
Okay.
So this is how it should anyway be.
Is Turkey now in November 2013 where it should be if it's in accession talks?
No, it's not. Neither is the EU. I mean, to answer your question first, I understand what you're saying. It is not. It certainly is far from a candidate country, far from being showing the responsibility of a candidate country in terms of protection of human rights, democracy, etc. But that's why the accession negotiations are so key.
But isn't the EU doing Turkey a favor then? We're back to this word rewarding. They're doing Ankara a favor by keeping these talks alive.
No, they are. I think the understanding in the EU is that they actually are, by opening another chapter, they are giving support to civil society in Turkey. That's how the EU is looking at this now, and I think that's a good way of looking at it.
If the talks had been going on in the summer, do you think the crackdown would have happened?
No, I don't think so. And actually, the protests might have not been so big also. Because what has led so many thousands of people into the streets was this sort of sense of unrepresentation, being excluded by the Turkish government, not being heard.
Being left alone.
Being left alone, and not having any hope. Now, if we were where we were 3 years ago, where accession negotiations were going on, there were reforms, there was a hope, there was there was a future in sight, then the people in the opposition had less reason to really go on the streets.
All right, let's turn the finger then and point it back at us. Stefan, has Europe, have the Germans let the Turks down?
No, and we shouldn't do it in the future. But let me say one thing first. We have an internal problem here in Germany, in the German Bundestag, because our ruling Christian Democrats are against a membership of Turkey in the EU. And the three other parties, the Green Party, Social Democrats, and our party, are in favor of it. But nevertheless, after the Taksim Square things...
Stefan, how do you explain that?
Yeah.
Here you are praising the ideals that Edward Snowden stands for.
Yeah.
And if you go back in time to June and go to Istanbul, you had a government that was cracking down on peaceful demonstrators using tear gas and water cannons. Now, why should you be willing to talk with Ankara if they behave this way? They're behaving the same way you say the NSA is behaving.
Yeah, and because of that, I think it is not a good signal to open a new chapter right now. What we would ask for is new signals for civil rights, for religion freedom, for freedom of speaking in Turkey, and that's what we not got in the last month and weeks. And so I think it is not a good idea to open a new chapter right now. But it is a different story from Angela Merkel's Christian Democrats. They don't want to have Turkey in the EU. We want, but we need a little more time and more discussions in Turkey.
The Minister for European Union Affairs in Turkey, Egemen Bagis, said that his country has to accept that its long-cherished goal of joining the EU will end in disappointment. He says, I think in the long run, Turkey will end up like Norway. What's wrong with that?
Well, it's...
the Norwegians are happy.
Yes, but Turkey is not like Norway, and that's not going to happen. What he means is we will be like Norway, our economy is doing so well, and our institutions are there. We actually don't need the EU, just like Norway does. But Turkey is not like Norway. Our economy is not as strong as Norway, and our institutions are not as strong. Democracy, we don't have a democracy yet in the substantive terms.
Is that the fear that without being integrated in the EU, that the political establishment of Turkey, and here we are with trust again, cannot be trusted to take Turkey towards a liberal democracy?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big indictment that you're saying here. You're saying
Yes.
not only Erdogan, but the entire political establishment of Turkey cannot be trusted to act in the interests of its people.
Well, let me not use the word trusted. But the EU process is very key for democratization in Turkey. I mean, when you look back history, Turkey has always been a Europeanization process. This project, it has always been a project, and that has always what pushed country towards reform. But this should not be misunderstood. That if there was no EU, there wouldn't be any internal demand for democracy in Turkey. That's not the case at all. There is a strong civil society in Turkey that's getting stronger and louder in a way, and there is a real demand on the part of many people in Turkey for democracy. But we have a very strong state tradition, which has always been authoritarian. There is really not an established culture of democracy in Turkey. But things are changing for the better.
What about the last 80 years, though? What about the legacy of Ataturk?
Well, that was not democracy, really, in the real sense.
But it was a secularized state.
Sure.
That Europe has always praised and lauded.
Well, that depends also on how you define secularism. We have the Diyanet Institution, the Institute of Religious Affairs, a huge bureaucracy employing thousands of people with a very big budget, which is funded by the government on religious affairs. So leaving that aside, I mean, to what extent Turkey is secular really, I think, is a question mark. But then when you look at democracy, I mean, Turkey was, arguably a secular country, but not a democracy. We had 3 military coups d'etats,
Right.
actually more military interventions. The majority has never really been represented. The devout Muslim majority has never been given a voice in Turkey until 10 years ago or so.
Tankut, you've spent time, obviously, in Turkey dealing with the Syrian crisis. Is Turkey a part of Europe? Is it Europe? Did you feel like you were in Europe when you were on the border between Syria and Turkey?
Well, sort of to give you 2 examples how I see that Turkey is really striving in the last years. One was 2 years ago when I was in Somalia. Actually, the first ships coming into Mogadishu port to give aid to Mogadishu and Somalia were from Turkish government. That was a very encouraging thing when all the other Europeans were too scared even to come into the waters of Somalia. And last year in Syria, or until very recently, the Turkish government made very clear that they can look after the Syrian refugees in Turkey themselves. They don't need international help. They don't need international organizations. Of course, we have a different stake here, but it clearly shows that the Turkish government is trying to find another stronger role in the world.
But what about for the Turkish people, though? I mean, I'm concerned about what happens inside. You know, there are more journalists in prison in Turkey than in China. Minorities, they can keep wishing all day if they want their rights to be protected. Gays and lesbians, for example, try to go build a church in Turkey. The question again, when you see the reality on the ground, aren't these accession talks? Aren't they misplaced? The timing is wrong, right? Erdogan and his government, they have not done their homework.
No, the timing is not. It's actually very right. I mean, first of all, I would, kindly disagree, because that's exactly what accession negotiations are for, to help candidate countries to improve democracy and human rights. Opening a new chapter doesn't mean taking Turkey into membership. The whole purpose of accession negotiations is actually to give homework, for the EU to give, in a way, homework to candidate countries, and to actually keep it under monitoring. Had the chapters on justice and security, on fundamental rights, been opened couple of years ago, I don't think we would have been here now, because there would have been a continuous dialogue between the EU and Turkey, and there would be monitoring. But to come to your question...
Briefly, though, we have to move on.
It wouldn't be rewarding the Turkish government. It would be giving support to civil society in Turkey.
Okay. Do you think in your lifetime, Turkey will become a member of the EU?
No, but in my lifetime, the EU may not also continue to exist.
Oh my God, okay, that's another story, yeah. And Stefan may be out of a job then. All right, let's move on. If Turkey does not seem to be preoccupied with Europe right now, it has good reason. Its border with Syria is where the action is, action that Ankara wishes would also become part of the past. Well, no such luck. The Syrian civil war rages on despite Damascus giving up its chemical weapons. The humanitarian crisis is worse than ever. For the first time since 1999, children are coming down with polio. Now, you have to remember, Syria, before this war, was the poster child of vaccination efforts in the Middle East. Every child in Syria was vaccinated against polio and other diseases before the conflict began. More than 2 years of fighting have exposed Syria's children to unspeakable horrors, including diseases that have no place in the 21st century.
Fighting in Syria continues with no end in sight. Since 2011, the civil war has killed around 115,000 people. Millions more have fled the country. It's not just bombs and bullets that are threatening people's lives. The World Health Organization has now confirmed an outbreak of polio. It's the first in Syria in 14 years. The Syrian government blames foreign jihadists for bringing the virus into the country. But organizing immunization for all of Syria's children is almost impossible in the war-torn country.
Yeah, the children are the victims every day. You see that, don't you? I mean, you just got back. You were on the show a year ago. You had just gotten back. The situation's gotten worse.
It certainly does. This year I was in northern Iraq, and we had a medical tent right at the border where we saw more than 800 patients over the course of 4 weeks. That was the only window when that border was open. More than 60,000 Syrian refugees crossed from Syria into Iraq. The biggest outpour of refugees out of Syria in the entire crisis so far. We have seen more than sort of a fifth of these refugees were young children under 5, yeah, and all of them had terrible stories to tell. And vaccination is one of them, measles vaccination, polio vaccination, but also pregnant women. We had mothers coming over to the border who just gave birth a day ago and said, well, they had waited in Syria for the baby to be born, and then the next day they made it over to the border to feel safe, to have access to healthcare. But that is the biggest problem we see in Syria, a completely collapsing health system.
A health system that's collapsing, and the world, the international community, the politicians, they're concerned about chemical weapons. Isn't that concern misplaced as a doctor?
As a doctor, very clearly what we see is, yes, they're the war wounded, yeah, and here we talk about tens of thousands of people being war wounded and not having access to care. We know that people who get a serious war wound need to be treated within an hour. That is impossible for a lot of people in Syria at the moment. We are also concerned, of course, of the vulnerable people, young children, sort of pregnant mothers, older people, but also chronic patients. We see that at the moment, probably more people died in Syria because of untreated chronic diseases than from war wounds.
We've brought you here today. We put you at the table here. You've got a member of the German parliament with you. I mean, obviously, that's where the purse strings are. Tell Stefan, what do Doctors Without Borders, what do you from governments in Europe now? Tell them.
Stefan, very clear. It is completely frustrating for us to see the lack of political will to solve that crisis, the lack also of the political actors to support the people. Yeah? And if you say, well, it is too dangerous to work in Syria, you can say yes, but on the other hand, we have 6 clinics at the moment working in Syria. It is possible under extremely difficult conditions. Yeah? There are no reasons, there are no apologies for me not to support the refugees in the surrounding countries. And we know from Lebanon, more than 30% of the population in Lebanon are Syrian refugees at the moment. Yeah? The complete country is overburdened. The Lebanon people have no access to healthcare anymore because the hospitals are overcrowded. Yeah? and the world community is completely failing politically. No, it does not.
Stefan.
I would disagree. I think the world community is caring about this terrible civil war, but the key to solve the problems is in the UN Security Council. And
you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah, it is right. We need a decision by the UN Security Council. We need an agreement with Russia and China, and that is a problem.
But you're not going to get that.
No, we did get this in the question of chemical weapons.
Stefan,
it is less, but it was important.
I mean, Stefan, listen, we have been trying. Let me read you a press release from Doctors Without Borders. Syrian people are now presented with the absurd situation of chemical weapons inspectors driving freely through areas in desperate need while ambulances and food and drug supplies organized by humanitarian organizations are blocked. The priorities are completely screwed up. And they're that way because of what the international community has done, what politicians are doing.
But if you would agree that we have an international rule of law, then we have to discuss with the United Nations and their Security Council. But there's one thing what we can do independently. We can do grant more asylum to Syrian refugees here in Germany. We have only a few, 5,000 or so I think we should do more on this. I think we should give more money to help them, help the people in the countries around Syria. That's what we can do independently, and that's what we should do.
Okay, you are definitely a fan of asylum. But bringing some families to Germany is not going to change what's happening on the ground.
But what would your answer be? We had a discussion about a military intervention. If you think about this, and if you think about the end,
let's talk about the
and this would be worse than before, then it wouldn't be an answer.
I'm concerned right now about getting help to the children, to the women, the sick people. The political solution can come later. But who's in the way? Who's preventing vaccinations, for example? Concrete.
No, I mean, people told me, and I asked them, and I've spoken to hundreds of Syrian refugees in the last 2 years. They're blocked. They try to stay in Syria. They don't want to come to Germany. Even if they are in the neighboring country, their number one goal, their number one wish is to go back to Syria. So this whole asylum seeker discussion, even so, I agree with you. It's a shame in Germany that we, after a month of debate, agreed to 5,000. But that is not the solution. The solution has to be in Syria and in the neighboring country. And the people are blocked in Syria. They faced. I've spoken to a family prior to when they made it to us. They left after they have moved inside Syria 6 times. 6 times they tried to find a safe place. Then their home was bombed again. Then when they finally decided to flee, they came to a roadblock. They were captured for 2 days, then released. Then they illegally crossed the border to Turkey, because inside Turkey it's easier at the moment to move than inside Syria because of all the roadblocks. They secretly sort of moved back into Syria, and then from Syria crossed into Iraq, and that's when they came to our tent. Completely sick people, completely sort of needed, shocked for all what they've gone through. And they say there is no way to find health and security in Syria anymore.
And you have some video that you took also, right, of what you saw in Syria with refugees, right? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, this place where we put up our medical tent at the border, we could look through a valley, and you can see that at our homepage. We could look down, and it's sort of a 5-kilometer no man's land. It was desert-like. It was more than 50 degrees hot, so people had to walk through that every single day to make it over to Iraq. So, of course, only those who were basically healthy could manage to come. Those people were exhausted, people were chronically sick, people sort of unbuttoned their shirts saying, well, I had cardiac surgery in Syria and I need it again. That's why I came here. And I had to tell them, well, sorry for you, but even northern Iraq, the health facilities are not good enough to do this.
The polio outbreak, though, I don't want us to forget that in all of this. Is it as simple as getting the vaccinations to the children? I mean, it is actually a simple solution, isn't it?
I mean, MSF, Doctors Without Borders, we vaccinated so far 80,000 children for measles and polio. Of course, that's not enough at all. Yeah? And we don't have access to everywhere. There is no agency at the moment in Syria, neither the public health system nor international UN or ICRC or Doctors Without Borders, who have access to all the children. So vaccination alone, you have to apply it to the children, and that's not working.
What are doctors telling you about all of these foreign jihadists that are going into Syria now? We get reports that they're actually blocking access. If anyone has humanitarian goods, they're blocking it. Are you hearing that? Did you hear that? Did you see that while you were there?
Well, the problem in Syria at the moment is it becomes more and more complex, the conflict. There are more and more stakeholders. So for us, talking to all the stakeholders, it becomes more and more difficult to make any security arrangement with all the parties on the ground. And yes, there is sort of the government troops, there's the opposition troops, there's now all those religious groups.
What about these jihadists bringing in diseases with them, coming from Pakistan, Afghanistan, coming into Syria where conditions are abysmal? Outsiders are actually a threat to the health of the Syrians right now, aren't they?
Well, it is maybe one component. I wouldn't exaggerate that one. The biggest problem we see is that Syrians don't have health access in their country. More than the majority of hospitals are either damaged or destroyed.
What about Assad? Before we wrap up, is the Assad regime, are they showing a willingness now, though, to at least help the children?
Well, we don't see that. We see that entire areas in the countries are isolated, blocked. People are starving. People are dying from hunger. And this is still in a sort of warm time of the year. It's getting colder. It's getting minus freezing temperatures soon. Yeah? And people are not able to live in places where they have no heating, no electricity, no running water anymore.
When are you going back?
Well, usually I'm able to do it once a year, so probably again next year.
And are Doctors Without Borders anticipating that all of next year they're going to be needed in Syria? They see no end to this, do they?
Well, all the people I've asked, all the Syrians I've asked, they are very desperate. They don't see any help. They don't see any hope that the conflict will end soon.
Yeah, well, we hope we can have you on the show again next year and that the report can be better. And we certainly hope that the children can get the vaccinations they need. That's going to wrap up this edition of Agenda with Brent Goff. Remember, you can contact me anytime with your thoughts on the show. You can find me on Facebook. You can tweet me at Brent Goff TV, or you can email me. You see the address on the screen. If you want to watch the show again, go to DW's website or watch us on YouTube. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. Join me next time when I set the agenda.